Welcome to another episode of Strive 365, where we help and guide you to live a better life, whether it be mentally, physically, emotionally, or spiritually, whether it's personally or professionally. I am your host, Justin Arnold, and we have an amazing guest. This is a good friend of mine. And you know what? I'm just going to stop right there and let her introduce herself. Why don't you go ahead, Nilaja?
Wow. Okay. Well, Nilaja Montgomery, but Nilaja, as you might be able to see on the screen. I am a mom, a veteran, a sister of Theta Nu Xi, Multicultural Sorority Incorporated, which is one of my biggest things that I do now. Did I say I'm a mom? I'm a mom.
She's a mom.
To an amazing kiddo. And I think, and I wrote a book.
She did. And we're going to talk about that here in this. But I have all my guests fill out this little questionnaire. And most fill it out and doing a wonderful job. I will say I'm impressed that she did. And one of the things that came up was her job or lack thereof. So that's the first question. So I want you to tell me more about this. So you've had this interesting journey over the last year, and you got laid off from your 6-figure job, and soon after you started seeking. We're just diving right in, seeking mental health counseling. This is a very important topic that I've talked about in my book. You're talking about in your man. So you're talking about in your book. So why don't you talk a little bit about that before we get into the book?
Okay, so if you are watching this, you have probably heard of the big tech layoff. So I think it started with Amazon, and then it went to Twitter, and then it went to Google, and it might have been Google first. I don't know. But pretty much, I was working for a boutique tech company called LiveRamp. Love the company. I loved my coworkers. I loved my salary, of course. I loved that I got to travel all around and meet up with clients and speak on the big stage. I actually, funny little tidbit, side bar. I actually got to meet J.R. Martinez, who is a veteran. I don't know if you know of him. He's been on Dancing with the Stars. He was on. Yeah, he was the one that his very first deployment was engulfed in flames inside a Humvee rollover. They had to hit a roadside bomb, the whole thing. But I got to introduce and hang out with him through LiveRamp because they had him teach, or not teach, but come and speak to us at one of our huge, sales events of the year. I don't even know what to call it. But anyway, so, I was loving my job. And all of a sudden, last summer, I started having some complications with my PTSD. And I put that in quotations, if you can see that, because I was not recognizing how what was happening in the world was affecting me and the psyche that I had as a soldier, if that makes sense. So I did 10 years in the military, and the mass shootings and the racial tensions, the cultural incompetencies of a lot of those around me were really affecting me. I got to the point where I felt like I was back in Iraq, if that makes sense. But I'm in intense. America. And I'm trying with all my might to be, this corporate guru, fly here, fly there, crunch numbers, help my clients make more money, data monetization, all these things, all these zing words. And meanwhile, inside, I was struggling like bad. And my husband was the one that noticed it. And he was like, we got to do something. Like, you're not okay. I was dropping the ball on so many things. I would think I did something, didn't really do it. I was talking. I was having issues with with integration, and with pretty much like basic cognitive function started to decline. I was
going to ask, what do you mean by, what specifically you meant by that, by recall?
Yep, cognitive dysfunction was happening.
Okay.
Right. And it was spiraling my anxiety out of control because I'm customer facing, I'm speaking to people all the time, and I can't even form a sentence correctly.
Oh, man.
What?
I'm trying to imagine what that looks like. Man, can you give an example? Yeah. I want to visualize this.
Well, it was like I'm talking to, and you may see it even today. It's something that I may struggle with from here on out as long as I have anxiety. But like I would say, you're doing great with your figures today. Maybe we can go to the refrigerator and da 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 da. And they're like, refrigerator? What do you mean by that? And I'm like,
merging thoughts
refrigerator
together.
Gone, like to the point where people were like, "Are you okay? Like, are you sure?"
Oh man.
So I actually went to a psychiatrist and got a evaluation done. I got MRIs done to make sure that because I was like, is it a tumor or what's going on?
Yeah. Well, you want to rule things out. I mean, I would do the same thing. I wouldn't.
Yeah.
I had my back injury last year, and like it was from tying my shoe. And I was like, I'm getting everything because I don't have stuff like this. I'm Mr. Super Fit. Like, so I got the MRIs, the X-rays, and I found out I was born weird, basically, in my back. But I would have done the same thing. So yeah, for sure.
Yep.
Continue.
Turns out it was just loss of cognitive function as it relates to anxiety. I was having panic attacks and didn't even know. Funny tidbit that I've learned, and I don't know if it's funny, but depression and anxiety shows up very differently in Black women than it does most anyone else. Yeah.
I want to hear more about that.
Yeah. So I've been digging deep into learning more about that. It's a cultural kind of survival technique that Black women have adapted over the years, and we don't know how to stop. So we just keep going. And even though to avoid the feelings of depression or to avoid feeling out of control, we then seek more control, if that makes sense.
No, it makes total sense. And I want to tell you why it makes total sense, but it makes total sense. Complete sense. For those that know me, know why it might make sense. But man, you got my mind just... Keep talking about this. I'm so glad you're on here just for this alone. But yeah, wow. I'm not surprised, but it's like until you hear the information, until somebody says that, and there's data to back it, and like so with that being, how do I want to say this? What are the effects? Like what's with like, let's say you just continue, because most people will just say, keep pushing on, keep finding control, control this, control that, control this. This is how I get control of my life, by controlling everything and everyone. What's the
exactly?
Or is there a fallback, and what is the fallback? Because I would believe that people that feel like I'm good, I'm not depressed like other people, I don't have issues, maybe a little seasonal, but right?
Exactly.
Am I imagining that? Yep. Okay. I'm so glad that you broke that down, because it's making more sense in my mind. But man, I want to know, like, going untreated, what's worst case scenario?
What was the final straw?
What? No, well, not just for you, but like for other people too that are listening.
Yeah. Oh yeah,
that might be dealing with this.
I'm not sure what it was for others. For me, it was very much a emotional and mental breakdown. All of a sudden, I dropped a lot of weight. And I had already had MRIs done, so they knew, I don't have cancer, I don't have a brain tumor, I don't have anything going on. I dropped 20 pounds in about a month.
Wow.
And that's when my husband was really like...
Forgive you a little, she's very fit, very active, CrossFit, strong, military. Just to give you guys, this isn't normal. Okay, continue.
Yeah. My normal is muscular and just, fit. And I all of a sudden look like a bobblehead. Literally. I lost weight almost instantaneously. And people were like, oh my God, you look great. What are you doing? Are you on a diet? Like, no, I'm just doing what I normally do, working out every day, doing all the things. And it got to the point where I was crying every single day. I would wake up with a ball in my throat and I was just a mess. And my psychologist at the time, who we're only not meeting right now because I've started EMDR, but she referred me to a psychiatrist. And she said, we just need to see what else is going on. So I did all these evaluations, all this testing, all this stuff. I was diagnosed with panic disorder and, of course, anxiety and depression, but mainly complications to the PTSD, because I was having nightmares. I wasn't sleeping. I had insomnia.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, my body started breaking down. So if you've I was actually, what's so funny, reading the book, The Body Keeps Score at the time, and it stopped at chapter 7 because it was talking about PTSD and veterans and how the body keeps score there. And I mean, I was having stomach issues, stomach pains, diarrhea, all these different things. And they didn't know why. They were just like, your body is like breaking down right now. We need you to stop. We just need you to stop. And I freaked out. I was like, I can't stop. Like, I have clients, I have this, I have to keep going. And they're like, no, you don't understand. It took the psychiatrist that I was referred to, which I still see to this. Actually, I'm seeing her tomorrow. Amazing lady. Yeah, my doctor, she was like, if you don't stop, I'm going to refer you to inpatient because I need you to stop. And I literally ran into the bathroom and threw up because it was like, how do I'm tearing up thinking about it. Like, how do I stop? I don't know what that looks like. To me, her saying stop, take disability leave, deal with yourself was equivalent to death. I'm like, you want me to die? I can't do that. And she's like, no, I just want you to rest. And I'm like, I don't know what that means. Like,
no, I get that.
I was in the car accident. Like, why are you punishing me? And she's like, no, like, for me to do my job, I need you to stop. And so that was the kind of the lowest point for me. And I know that sounds random.
No, especially that latter part. Like, I believe myself included, and people listening can probably relate to the stop part, especially. And I mean, I don't want to say this. For me personally, because I can talk on that, you know, growing up and I talk about this in my first, and I'm coming out with a second, and I talk even more deeper on this, on the busy mind and always feeling need to do stuff, and, you know, feeling like super dad or super this or great trainer or whatever. And so, you know, I know we're talking about a little bit different things, your experiences, my experiences, but at the end of the day, busyness and productivity is great and doing things for the world and helping others and yada, 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 but always feeling the need to do something, be busy, which is I'm guilty of, and I always have to check myself. And it's really been within the last 3 years that I've really been doing a lot of like self-care and self-work and realizing there's more productivity in resting my mind and my body. And for me to even capture, I'm like, I would never tell a client to work out all day, but here I am working my mind and my body all day, and that's not normal. I mean, we weren't built around this, and so I totally can relate, and I totally have been, maybe not to where you are, but I've been to places, for example, I'd run myself dry, and I all of a sudden, you know, I don't really do a lot of caffeine, but nothing would work. And then when I got COVID, when we were in Mexico together, and I talk about this a lot, it's the first time since my childhood and since my like teens and 20s that I can remember, and I'm 42 now, for those that don't know, that I was waking up and I didn't want to live. I felt depressed and I didn't know why. And my life was great, but yet I didn't, and I couldn't explain it. Just again, my body wasn't breaking down quite like yours, but it was just like over everything. Like I'd gotten COVID, but I had still been trying to push through, and I'm Justin the man. Like I need to show up for my family. I need to show up, like still trying to push through all this stuff, even while I was like, my body was trying to heal, and it just prolonged it. And it was like, you know, a roller coaster ride. Most mornings I woke up fine, but ever so often out of nowhere. And again, this wasn't normal, like over an 8-month period. And then I finally started working on the recovery, the rest, the midday naps, really honing in daily routines that incorporated meditation. And then it just went away. It was the craziest, coolest. And so I really preached that. And that's why I decided to write a second book and how to find joy and, you know, calming the mind and things like that. But that is incredible. I really, man, this is just fascinating me. Just talking about, you know, like you said, how Black women specifically, how this is just a unique perspective to the mental health that this is the first, I don't know, Scott probably can't chime in, but this is really the first time. I'm not surprised, obviously, when we talk about like generational trauma and things like that, and iniquities and things that are passed on. I'm not surprised, but to say it out loud and gets people thinking about it, we need to talk about it more, because there's so many people that I bet are just like you, and then they're going to pass it on to their kids, and they're going to be this vicious cycle, and it's just, and we need to attack it, because I don't know. I imagine we can see the worst case in society, right? Like with people aren't addressing, we can see it all over the world when people aren't. And, you know, you did it not just for yourself, but your family, correct? That was the big motivating factor, because you talk passionately about your husband, you talk passionately about your son. So, but what, if say this continues to go, say people be like, I'm fine, and then control, did these specialists you were working with, did they ever talk about like worst case scenario or anything? Or like, what's that? What is that like?
And it was actually happening. And I actually want to hit on talked about not wanting to live. That's where I got to. I got to the point where it hit me. So I was still dancing as well. I was on a dance team that was supposed to be my fun, my outlet. And I wanted to be perfect at that as well. So I'm like putting in extra hours dancing. I'm, putting in extra hours at work, trying to put in extra hours, not sleeping, right? Mind you. So let me just paint all of that picture for you.
I was going to ask, like, when do you sleep? Oh, you don't. Okay.
I didn't. I had insomnia and I thought it was normal. Man. I was like, oh, I can sleep for 2 hours and still do everything I want to do. Anyway, so kept going. And it was this one weekend we were performing in Miami. I was performing. It's supposed to be fun. It's supposed to be an outlet. It's supposed to be, feeding my soul. And I'm miserable. And I don't want to go and I don't want to do this, but it's a team. We all have to perform. If one person's missing, the formations don't work, So I have to go. I have to do this. Even though my psychiatrist had said, I need you to stop. And I was like, I'll just do this one more thing and then I'm done. I walk into the hotel room that we're staying and I see the balcony. We're in Miami. We're on the 19th floor. And I look at it and I'm like, will I be able to stop myself from jumping off that balcony if I absolutely decide I don't want to do it? Wow. Not will I jump off or, no, will I be able to stop myself? Because I don't know if I can do this anymore. But on the outside, I'm like happy and getting things done and da-da-da-da-da. And she said, if you start to feel like you don't want to be on this earth, you need to tell someone around you. So I told the people in my room and they were like, oh, that's sad. We would never want you to not be here. Oh, okay. And then just continued the weekend. 2 days later, we get back from Miami and I am just exhausted, tired. I had migraines. Migraines started coming. I hadn't had migraines since I was in the military. I was sleeping more than not. And I wasn't even really sleeping. I was just laying. My body was so tired. I felt like I could just lay down and literally die. And 2 days later, after we got back from Miami, two of the people that I had told that I was suicidal were like, so you were really mean in Miami and we didn't appreciate how mean you were. And we just feel like if you can't show up in a better way type of thing, then yeah. And people
that are listening, I have a lot of body language, right? And I'm just, I want to cry. Yeah. To be honest, this is because what you're saying, I feel I felt that when you said that, and I've been there, and I know other people that are listening have been there, and you did what was so brave. So much courage.
Yeah.
So hard. And I assume
hardest thing I've ever done in my life.
For Black women, humans, I know for men, and I can speak from a man's point of view, it would be looked at as weakness to admit stuff like that. And here you are opening your heart for people to step in and they turn it back on you, man.
Yeah.
I am so glad you are here. I just want to say that right now. I'm just so glad because she is an amazing human. She is a beautiful inside and out creature that's why I wanted her on here, because she's struggling just like anybody else, but she's also striving and she can offer some value tip. So I continue, but I just wanted to say that. And anybody that's listening, share it. And if that person isn't listening, continue to share it. I'll tell you this, we love you and we don't even know you. You are loved, and I just want to share that with you. And Scott, we need to make sure that at the end of this episode, on these notes, that we put some numbers that people can call if they do need to call somebody. If there's nobody around listening, okay, awesome. Anyways, continue.
Yes, please. That I definitely was going to say that as well. So I called my husband, and he was like, "Get on a flight right now. I'm going to send you, this flight. And then I was like, well, and we were looking at how much it was going to cost and all that. And I was like, I think I can make it one more. It was the next day that I was going to be coming home. So I came home and he's like, okay, like you're meeting with your psychiatrist. I finally went on disability leave from work because it was real. This took that for it to be real to me.
Yeah.
So I took my disability leave. I started meds immediately. I am on several medications now.
Hey, whatever works. I always tell people whatever works. I've talked on this episode, like therapy didn't work for me, but it worked for others. But I do say what does work for me, so just if it's working,
and I had never been on meds.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
I never thought I would need them. I just was like, I've been in therapy since 2013, since I left active duty. And so it never came up. It was never something that was needed, but apparently at that point it was emergency. Like it was like, no, we need to stop your system from, it was just overreacting. It was to the point where I couldn't keep down food. I couldn't do anything. And if I kept going that way, I possibly would die. Whether it was, my body continuing to break down or I end up taking my own life because there was no reprieve.
Yeah.
And I was the only one that could reach out and get the reprieve. It couldn't be everyone telling me, oh, you need to just rest. I had to succumb to it and almost think of it as a brave thing to do because it felt like failure. And I had to change my mindset. This is not failure. This is in fact brave because you are taking the time that's needed for you. And so many people don't do that. So this is a brave thing. This is a brave thing. But it was like, I almost had to tell shove it down my own throat.
You have to.
And it felt, I'm telling you, it felt gross. Every time, even now when I'm doing EMDR and she's like, let's just sit with this emotion. Let's not say anything. I want to vomit.
Love that.
Like it makes me want to vomit.
No, I get it. Like, it took me a while to realize that, like, man, it's okay to sit in your emotions. It's something I'm teaching my kids. It's okay to cry. For example, my son, it's not weak. It's strength.
No.
I want to know how you're feeling. I don't know how to help you or listen or whatever, like to be present here with you. Listen how you're feeling. Feelings are important. They're there for a reason. And it's strength to show them. I believe it's weak to hide them. And I was weak, so I can talk from that place. I was, and then now, man, I'm like, I joke in my house. I was like, I cry more in one day than most people cry in a year. But it's a joke. But it's the point is like, be okay. Like in my first book, I have a chapter called "Be Okay with Tears," and this is what she's talking about. Like,
yes,
it's, and then when you share your emotion, we talked about earlier, like, you need people in your corner, and she just thought these were people. They weren't. There are people, and so, man, I love what you're sharing so far. This is powerful. Before we move on, was there anything else you wanted to talk on that? Because it seemed like you had something else to say.
No, it was. I did want to hit on how my husband had already been through that.
For sure.
In a way.
Yeah, because I know that, I realize, but my listeners don't. Yeah, you talk about your husband and his.
Okay. Yes.
His story of mental health and mental health counseling.
So my husband had a suicide attempt in 2019, and it's only an attempt because he still lived, but he did it. Like, he should not be here.
Yeah. And you can share what he did if you're comfortable with it.
Say it again.
You can share what he did if you're comfortable with it.
I'm okay. If I did, I guess we had to put like I call them activation warnings because I don't like the word trigger. As I'm about to explain
it makes
why.
sense, especially with what you're about to say. But yeah, so if you're listening in this, if you're listening and this might bother you, this is sensitive information specifically. You don't go into great detail, but I think it's important to share the severity and how far he did go and how blessed he is to still be
and
here.
How it was so out of left field. We did not expect. I didn't expect. He didn't even expect. So pretty much he dissociated after I don't even know how many of his battle buddies, people that he's deployed with, had died. And this one was really hard for us. Rest in peace, Josh Haas. He was one of our favorite Rangers. And he passed away due to pancreatic cancer. He was getting better. They were all planning, a bunch of his Ranger buddies were planning to go see him. And then that weekend that they were supposed to go see him, he actually passed away. And it was very shocking. It was very jarring. None of us were okay. But my husband took it very, very hard. And he had a lot of deaths. His grandparents had passed away within 3 months of each other. His mom had passed away. He had not mourned any of them. He had not been to any individual counseling. We would go to marriage counseling because here's the reality. When you're not okay individually, it's hard to show up in a partnership as your whole self, period. It doesn't matter. And so he kept trying to heal his whole self by our marriage counseling, and it doesn't work that way. And so, one night he completely dissociated, decided to take a gun and shoot himself, and in the head. And it was in front of me. It was in front of myself and a roommate that was staying with us, a first sergeant that was stationed at Port Carson as well. And we just went into soldier mode. We have to save him. But in the back of my mind, I thought, there's no way. I was planning a funeral. And now that it's all said and done, and it's never really all said and done, it's something that we're going to be working through for the rest of our lives. But he never wanted me to feel the pressures of suicide ever. And so when I tell him this, he's like, when I tell him, like, I'm struggling, I'm in Miami, I'm on the beach, I'm supposed to be happy, I'm supposed to be loving right now, I'm dancing, I should be enjoying my life. Why do I hate it so much? And he's like, we need you on a flight home right now. I'm not losing you. Like, he went into like above and over because he felt what I felt. And he was like, I'm not losing you. So he fought for me the same way I fought for him. So, yeah.
He lived from attempted suicide, as you said. And do you believe, or have you ever thought about that happened almost for a reason to save your life?
Maybe. That's something we're exploring right now.
It's crazy. I know it's crazy.
We're exploring. We still don't know why he's here. I mean, he should not be here. And for the listeners, he's walking, he can wipe his own butt, he can drive, he can.
Yeah, we've had conversations. He's got it together.
He's got his cognitive function. He's actually in a PhD program right now. I don't know how.
I mean, he's got scars. How would you say it? He's got scars.
Because it went from here, so he's got a huge scar here. I mean, exploded his face, and he had to get it reconstructed. He's got
a visual reminder for the rest of his life. Everyone around him.
He's blind in this eye as well. He's blind in his left eye.
Yeah,
so if you come up on that side of him, he can't see you at all. But
yeah, you did say that when we talked, and so the only reason I asked that, and I don't say there has to be, it's just, I wrote a book called Purpose Through Pain, and it took me forever. When I started connecting dots and finding some lesson in it, there was always an answer, and it may have taken a while, but it always led me down healthier physical, mental, even career path. Like, that's why I do what I do, and the people that I help is because all the and the way I'm a life coach and a personal trainer, predominantly my clients are people of pain or injury, and a lot of them dealing with like the mental connection to the body. You talked about that book. So that is my story. That may not be everybody's, but the more I try to at least search for, it's so hard though, because there's so many layers and levels to like, first, you don't even want to like look at it. You don't even think about it. Exactly. It makes you sick to your stomach. I'll share this and then we'll move on. But, writing my book was one of the best things I ever did for me. I couldn't even write. I was avoiding certain things to write about. And when I wrote it, I just wrote it really fast. And then when I reread it the first time, I had the most emotional breakdown that I've ever had that I can remember in my entire life. Like, I could feel it in my body, but it was like an emotional release that I'm like, holy shit. Excuse my language on my own podcast, but there's no other way to say it. But I had the best release ever. And I was like, oh my God, it's like the pain flew out of my body. I have no other way to explain it. Ever since then, like, I just write and journal anytime I deal with stuff. That's my therapy. And it's been, there's other things I do, but that's just one of the biggest things when I write it down and make it visual. And then when I've read my book like 10 times now, it's just like, it's a story in my life that happened. And these things are just things. So that's been huge for me. And I wanted to share that. Man, that's wow. Thank you for sharing all that. Like, so we talked a lot about EDMR therapy. That's new to probably me and a lot of people. Why don't you talk about that? Because I'm sure it's helping you strive a little bit. Yeah.
So when you're describing as writing your book being so cathartic, is a lot of how my EMDR journey has gone. And EMDR is eye movement.
Eye movement desensitization and reprocessing therapy.
There it is.
There you go.
Yes. So instead, for me, I actually use these like paddles that like vibrate in my hands. And I don't necessarily move my eyes back and forth, but for me, it's so somatic. Everything shows up in my body. And so it's not really a head thing for me because I can get in my head and be done. So it's a lot of like slowing me down. We go through what actually happened, and then I connect the dots and I process it in my amygdala. That way it can start to be, I don't feel it in my body so readily. And so it's allowed me to write more and just be really more authentically myself. It's very hard to be your authentic self when you're hiding from some of your deepest and darkest events of your life.
I agree wholeheartedly to that statement, for sure.
Yeah. And then I found out the more that I could not hold space for that stuff anymore, it was just piling up. More traumatic things would happen, and I would just put it in my backpack and keep going, kind of like Dora the Explorer. Like, I can take that too. I can take that too. I can handle it all. And then one day it just all fell, and I didn't know. I had no tools. I had nothing, so now I'm processing it all at the same time, and it's rough.
Yeah, one of the things that I similar to the being most authentic self is when I started processing my trauma and the things that I've been through, is I noticed for me, giving and receiving. I've always been a big giver and showing up, and I've read even about like, oh my God, people who have gone through childhood trauma are big on giving, but it's the right thing to do. But like, it's like I was overdoing it. But one thing I never realized that I wasn't doing was receiving really well. And what I mean by that, the best example I can give is the first time I truly received a hug from my child. Another emotional experience. And for those that have like, this guy's crazy, or maybe you're not, I don't know, but because it was weird for me to really understand what that was. I would give a hug, but I wouldn't receive a hug. And to explain what I did to receive a hug, it was just this feeling I realized, and it came through a deep meditation where I was like, I'm not really... It was like this thought is like, I'm a giver, but am I ever really receiving, is a question I asked myself. And I feel like to get really crazy with it, I felt like Jesus was sitting on my shoulder and all this, but no, I wasn't high, guys. But the point I'm getting at is when I hugged my son, and I have 3 kids, and I just breathed it in, and I didn't care how long it lasted. I just knew that I didn't want it to be a quick, and I just took it in. Instead of me just giving him a big old bear dad hug, I let him give me a hug. I started like, just holy crap, is that what? And for those that don't understand, so for somebody like me, I went through childhood trauma from the age of like 5 to 10, and even a few years afterwards, by people that were supposed to love me and I was supposed to trust and were close to me. So when that was my way, how do I explain this? I was giving altered. You know what I'm talking about, but like basically things were wired improperly. This was love to me in my mind. It took me till I was older in my 30s to figure this out. So to me, love was painful, was hard. I don't want to receive this stuff. I don't want to be this jammed in me, essentially. Sorry for the term I'm using, but that's essentially what it was. So I could give it, but there's no way in hell I'm going to receive it because it was totally messed up in my head. But it took me years, like I said, 30s, like to addressing it, realizing it, writing about it, talking about it, going over it, understanding that this, and really exploring it. And I wasn't getting that out of therapy. I think it was not because therapy's bad. I just was with therapists that weren't helpful for me. It sounds like you got something really great. I'm jealous, but
I was on a wait list for 2 years to get this therapist.
That's what I need.
Worry.
I need to get on a wait list.
That's a whole other.
So what I mean is like that, and it took me around. Like I was holding from receiving because the messages were mixed up. They were messed up. Yep. And when I finally broke release of that, to make this short and sweet, I could finally receive. And it's changed everything. I'll be honest. It's even changed my love life, my sex life, like everything. I said it on live things. So like, it's incredible what it's done. So those are listening that have dealt with stuff like her and I, think about that. Like life is a continual process of getting better and growing. But you gotta address these things, and you gotta know that it's not your fault. We're all learning this thing called life, and especially things that happened to you or occurred to you or things that happened 100 years ago from generational trauma. Like that's not your fault. And you got to work through that stuff. Correct.
But but it is your responsibility to work through it and be that person that can help the next generation, which is exactly why I'm doing what I'm doing. I have to talk. This isn't my book, but I recently read Adult Children of Emotionally Immature Parents. Oh my God.
I've heard that one. I haven't read it yet, though. What you're talking
about is like a healing fantasy that like one day I'm going to have my own family and I'm not going to do things like this. So we're going to do things like this, and this is going to heal whatever traumas I had as a child. I really, truly thought that. And that's not true. The only way to get through it is to actually go through it and unpack it and deconstruct it and kind of go through all of it. And that's the way. And that's what I'm doing with EMDR.
And to go over that, like a lot of people, I would say, one, they don't want to address it because it's painful, but we're also, quote unquote, too busy. I don't have time to deal with that.
That was me.
You know? Yeah, and that was me too. And what I realized is that it's opened the door to so much, and I've gotten more productivity. I've connected deeper in relationships, work, all these things. I'm doing a podcast. Like the point is there's things that are literally holding you back personally. That's why she's on here. Professionally, emotionally. Every single aspect of your life, if you're not working on and if you think maybe you didn't go through some things that as bad as her, there's always something. There could be generational things. Something. And it's just, it's really getting to know yourself. Like I always say, this is your only body. Like you can trade in everything. This is your only body, and we don't know it. I talk about it from a physical point, like people don't know or connect to their body, but internally in the things that we've been through and the things that we've experienced, we don't know it as well. And we have to continue to know it till, our last breath. And you can have choice over that. And I'll tell you this, you will live a longer life, a longer, better life when you start just working at it. And maybe it's just like 10 minutes a day. Maybe it's doing what she's doing. Maybe it's exploring. Maybe it's writing. Maybe it's journaling. Just find a way and get started and just start there. Yes. Man, so it sounds like EDM's helping you strive every day, but is there other ways that how are the ways that it's helping you strive, I guess is the point. It sounds like it is, but how are the ways?
So right now we're processing a certain memory that I thought I had already dealt with a long, long time ago. It was a sexual trauma that I had from a family member. And I thought I dealt with it. And now I'm realizing how that core memory at 8 years old has contributed to my lack of feeling safe today. That connection has been pivotal.
Wow.
Because on the surface, it was, there's mass shootings happening. Like, I'm worried about my son at school. Like, I mean, we should all be worried about our kids at school because they're dying there more than anywhere else, and all these different things. And so I was like very surface with it. I was like, it's this. And then as we really started to, she's like, so tell me more about this. When was the first time you felt unsafe? When was the first time? And it hit me. Oh my gosh. It was when I was 8 years old. And this happened. And I told my mom, and she said, oh, well, you just have to understand that those things can happen. And they played it off as if it was just a kid. Oh, kids playing house, and it's not that serious. But nobody took me seriously. And I saw that showed up even today, where I tell these two women on this team that I'm this way, and they're just like, you're fine. Everything's fine. Part of that is me, because that's how I show up. I'm always fine. But part of that is also, as a child, I was never believed. I was never nurtured into. I was never put in that place to be the one that knows exactly how I feel. My feelings are always wrong. And now connecting it to who I am as an adult, and I'm like, oh my God, I have so much work to do. I did not realize that I'm still that 8-year-old little girl. So she often has me, my therapist has me pull that 8-year-old little girl out. What is she wearing? What does she look like? Talk to her and tell her. And I am bawling. I'm like,
no, I get it. Like inner child work, it's work I've done. I talk about it in my second book. It's a continual process. You have to, especially if you've had that. And it's that your therapist sounds amazing. It sounds like you're doing some really great work.
I've been on the wait list for 2 years. And that's why my psychologist was one that referred me to her. And I'm just going to work with her solely until there's no end date.
Yeah. I mean,
we're not.
No, I love it. I mean, I'm one that's done inner child work, not specifically with a therapist, but on my own. And then also in like, I don't want to put it like group therapy type settings, and got explained to it. And then, you got to go back there. And one of the biggest things that was hard for me, that was also another big therapy, was forgiving those people. But also, like, I can relate to what you're saying. There were people in my life, especially when I started to admit to things as an adult, that I just kept in, and people didn't even know the truth. And then they basically wash my feelings aside, even as an adult. And it's like, that's how it was as a kid. It was like, move on, Justin, like, as if like my feelings didn't matter. Like, oh, you're always good. You're good. Like, telling me how I'm supposed to be. And like, I am good, but it's just like,
I've had therapists be like, I mean, you're making 6 figures, you're doing this, you're fine. Like, you're good.
Yeah.
Why are you even complaining? You're good. I'm like, oh, because I can, which it's called post-traumatic growth, because I can grow from the pain doesn't mean that it hurts any less. And it doesn't mean that it's not something that I still need to deal with.
You hear that? You can grow from the pain, but it doesn't mean it doesn't hurt any less. Yeah. That's I agree. And this is just more on like why we need to talk about it, why it needs to be looked at as brave. And that, man, sounds like a segue to your book. Like, the new book is literally called Uncovering the Brave Within. And I just wrote, it's about female impact leaders from around the world to share their personal stories of overcoming trauma and finding a better way of living. So can you tell us more about the themes, lesson the readers can expect to take away from this book? For sure.
So this is actually a collaborative book. My individual book will be coming out later this year. As I'm doing healing work, some of the narratives are changing a little bit. So I'm working through editing my personal book. But this book is collaborative with, oh my gosh, I believe there's 21 of us, 21 authors. It's kind of like chicken soup for the soul. And so each chapter is that author's individual story. My chapter, which is chapter 4, is about the time that my husband and I were going to get a divorce. So it's about divorce, navigating that. I mean, the papers were filled out. We did everything but actually turn them in. Oh, wow. We were legally separated and we were living in separate places. And it's just about that whole, he was stationed in Europe at the time, me going to visit him there, us having the discussions, figuring out how we're going to separate lives, and then realizing ultimately that we did not want a divorce. We just had our own individual things that we had to really hone in on, because we could be great together, but it was going to take work that we needed to decide, were we really willing to do that work? And in the end, we decided that we were. I love that. We did, and we still are, and we're going to continue. It's never going to end. Healing is not, and you don't arrive. There's no, oh, we've arrived to this place of healing. Like, that's not real.
Yeah, and I say this to my kids, and I tell other people the most important relationship and this isn't to get brownie points with my wife. She's the most important thing in my life. And I have to remind myself that. Am I showing that? Am I living up to that? And if I'm not, and I realize it's yeah, you could say happy wife, happy life, but it's truly like the most important. Like, she does make me better. She challenges me. We are better together. The kids are better together. It's a great community we have within our own home. And I can honestly admit, anytime there's friction, it's usually, I'm not gonna say it's my fault. But no, but it's usually like selfishness. It usually comes down to that. But when I'm serving, when I'm loving, and also when I became, honestly, our relationship was always good, but it massively improved when I was receiving more of her. Because when I became a better receiver, I also became a better giver. It was crazy. So yeah, it was because I was more open, right? It was cyclical. Yep. Like we can't just receive, like off the top of my head, I started thinking of like a faucet in a way, like we could have, water running in one way, but if it's not going things are going to get clogged up. And then I essentially was clogged up for like 33 years because I was only putting it out, but not getting it back. So that's how I like to look at it. So
I love that.
Yeah, I just came up with it in my head, but that's how I like to look at it, because it's like when I can do that, I'm like, man, I notice just in life, and when relationships are cyclical and things like that, when we're getting benefit and we're giving and receiving great energy, man, that's going to spread out into the world, and
Exactly.
and that's why we got to work on these things, because you're talking about the biggest reason. So like you mentioned that, like in the bio that you married your yin and yang, and you're some of the most meaningful people in your lives, right? And like and so like I want to hear more about that, and like how do you balance this, especially now, and with the projects you're working on. You're a famous author now, so how do you balance all this?
So weird. As are you. It's so weird. Because when we talked years ago, none of this was happening, and now it's like,
look what can happen when you work on your mental health. You can write a book, or you can do something else. You don't have to write a book, by the way. You can do stuff. You can, because you're more open, right?
Well, I'm actually going into the mental health field. That's what I'm doing. I am taking one class at a time, and I am going to become a clinical mental health therapist.
That's amazing. And look at that.
Yep.
Purpose through pain right there. Wow.
And it was my husband who was like, go for it. Like, yeah, we probably don't have the money for you to go back to school right now, but do it. Like, I just want you to enjoy life. And he's like, you would make a great therapist. He's like, you've been my therapist, and I didn't realize that's what you were thinking.
Oh, that's awesome.
But it's funny because we don't do marriage counseling anymore. Like, I have my therapist, he has his therapist, Justice has his own therapist.
Oh, wow. And things are working out.
Our son knows that if you don't feel like you can come to mom and dad, you've got somebody that you can call no matter when. And, we will always, we're all a unit that wants to help you. And we don't ever want it to be taboo. We don't ever want it to be a stigma. Because we didn't have that growing up, my husband and I, at all. Actually, my husband had a very horrible experience with mental health growing up. He was told he had ADHD. He had to be put on meds, and made him gain all this weight. He got, bullied, and it was always a negative thing for him.
Well, it's amazing as we just had, I love this podcast for this. We're having open, real, raw conversations with people, and how similar our stories are. But yeah, we think we're like what you said are similar. Like I got told I had ADHD, and like I had a learning disability. And so for those that read my first book, this, but like after my first run in with like sexual abuse, that babysitter burned our house down while we were inside of it. And I didn't talk for a year out. Oh, you haven't read my book. So yeah,
I haven't read it.
My story probably could be a movie. I feel like a lot of people's could too.
It should be.
So like, yeah. So I was like 6 years old, and then there was two older family members living in the house, and then we had a babysitter who was a family friend, trusted, and everything else, been babysitting us for a while. I bet he'd been also molesting me for a while. And I always just say, use your imagination, because the wildest things occurred. And then I seemingly out of nowhere. How do I remember? I was 6. All I remember is like he set the house on fire, and then he changed his last minute to take me and one of the other family members out and leave one in there. All got out alive. It took us over neighbors trying to look like a hero, but I didn't talk for a year after that. I scored like a 140 on IQ, which is decent, but like I didn't talk for a year, so I got put in special ed classes. And so I started to think I was special. And I did like Special Olympics, and I did this. So I started, man, something must be wrong with me, because I'm not doing what all these other kids are doing, and I'm not writing or thinking. So I started just like mimicking them. And then it took a while to figure out that, like a long while. And a book that I read that really helped me out was the Da Vinci Method. It talks about people that so you know what I'm talking about. So that really helped me, and like, holy crap, this whole time I've got a superpower, and I really do believe it's just a way of managing it. And then that's where the idea of the book and all these different things. So I just talk about that because it's like, you really have to like realize like your environment, and you have to take a step back, and you got to realize if you're not working and growing and all these things, man. Wow, I didn't expect to cover all this today, but this has been incredible. Man, I got a couple more questions. This is so amazing. I feel like you're another one. There's like a third guest in a row where I'm like, man, we got to have a second one. But I definitely want to get into this. I think this is important to cover. Well, I know this is important, and we haven't really talked a whole lot. I mean, but you mentioned in your bio that you hope to bridge the gap between mental health care and BIPOC individuals. And so I really just want to touch on that because we have talked a little bit about that in this, but I believe that's super important. As we talked earlier, it seems like it's not really being talked about. At least I didn't know about it. And it sounds like a very huge need. And I can talk from just people I know that probably don't even think anything's wrong with them. So can you share with us some of the challenges and opportunities you see in this space?
Yes. So I am the only person in my family, in my immediate family, me, like my sisters, my mom, dad, cousins, whatnot on my side, only one in therapy. I have tried again and again, and honestly, they don't feel comfortable because they don't see anybody that looks like them. Less than 5% of mental health professionals are Black. And of that...
Less than 5%, you said?
5%.
Representation.
Exactly. And you have to think of a lot of the books, like the DSM-5, I think now we're coming out with the DSM-7. There wasn't even a female voice attributed to those books, which is how diagnoses are given. They go in that big book, that dictionary, and decide, da-da-da-da-da. It was written by white men. And then white women started to have a place in there, but there's really not other voices that are being presented in a way that, oh, it could look different in another culture or whatnot. I mean, I'm in a class right now. All of the assessments that were made up were by white men, and then there were some that were white women, but it was still based off the data, which was only white men were in the workforce. So the data was really on white men. So it's like we're trying to heal people without those voices even being a factor.
And for those that don't know what DSM, it's Diagnostic and Statistical Manual of Mental Disorders. That's what she was talking about. And like, so the similar thing as you probably know too, being a certified fitness coach, health person in this world, like same thing with the research in the health and wellness world. Like the research and stuff was mainly done on white men and then men. And it wasn't until more recently they started doing women and athletic bodies and like things around their period and when to train and when not to train and how to train. And we found out so much just within like since 2017. Really, it's just so new and it's so incredible, and like how coaches and trainers and people can address and really maximize women, and also to tail off. Like if they're going through a period, not time to be doing like sprint interval work at their highest capacity and wondering why they're emotionally broken down for the meet on Saturday. Just understanding these things, and then that plays into the mental disorder issue, and it can even be like caused because of these things in society. And so just being aware and so yeah. That's
it's so pivotal. I'm so excited.
I'm so glad.
Going on.
I'm so glad.
I plan to go on to do my PhD because I want to attribute. So obviously my biggest issue that I see, I was a medical officer in the military, and the biggest issue I see is how soldiers are not given the care that is necessary for them to do the work that they need to do in the military. I'm not talking about veterans post service. I'm talking about in the military right now doing what they need to do. We really need to be taking more care of our soldiers while they're in. And so I want to persuade policy in a lot of different ways by making sure the data is there. Because right now it's not. So, and that's what I did in with Oracle and LiveRamp. I was a data monetizer. So I
it's
literally helped people monetize data, get money for data.
Wow.
Now I'm not doing it. It felt
no, but it sounds like everything's going in the direction and like, finding more of a deeper purpose and you're so passionate. The way you talked about on here, people can't understand her energy. Like I'm seeing it in her body language, her face. Like she's in a pathway to helping herself and therefore helping more people, all because of her addressing her pain, her trauma, her mental health. And this is not to say that everybody that once you address this, you're all going to want to become trainers or mental health counselors. It might be something else. It might be the best teacher. It might be the best mom. It might be the best dad. Just know that if you're not addressing it, you're limiting yourself. You really are. You're limiting yourself and the potential you have. And if that doesn't matter to you, you're limiting the capacity that you can have those around you. If you're a parent listening to this, you're limiting, I'm just going to say, you're limiting yourself. Because I guarantee you from personal experience, I was limiting myself, but I didn't even know it. But when I started really dealing with it, I realized that I can be a great dad and a husband and do other things. Doesn't mean I got to like not sleep and work 24/7. It means they are watching me. Also, they're watching me lay on my little Shakti mat in the middle of the day because I need a 15-minute nap so I can be a more present and amazing dad. Again, an example of productivity and rest. And that's also another example of discomfort and finding comfort in discomfort. But that's a whole other story, which we talked about. Yeah, we actually had a podcast on comfort through discomfort, which I'm sure you can relate on. So I want to... We could keep talking, but I always ask in some form or fashion, like, you know, is there anything else you can help people strive? But I'm going to ask more specific. As a mental health advocate, what advice would you give listeners who might be struggling? And how would you suggest they prioritize their mental, their physical, their emotional, or spiritual have a way on a daily basis?
I'm going to say this is going to sound really hokey, but find a meditation app. Any meditation app that works for you. I use Calm only because Shine has been taken up by Headspace, and I just don't like the look of it or whatnot.
What was
Shine?
It called? Shine.
Yeah.
I don't think I've heard
Shine,
of that one.
I found that one. Well, they've been absorbed by Headspace now, but it was only
I know Headspace. I'm going to see the ones I have on my phone. I'm going to give some examples.
BIPOC women. It was women and brown and indigenous women, and they would be the ones speaking. It just fed my soul. So now I use Calm, but every morning, rather than getting on my phone, the first thing I do is put on a meditation, go in, look at myself in the mirror, breathe, and just connect with myself. Literally look myself in the eyes and listen to this meditation, do everything the meditation says to do. If it tells me I need to be lying down, I'll lie down, whatever I need to do. And that's how I start my day. I feel like that has changed so much for me. And it's simple. I mean, I'm talking 7 minutes. I'm talking 5 minutes. I'm not talking an hour. I'm not talking, half a breath or going to yoga or whatnot. Just literally sitting in stillness and quiet. And starting that way has slowed me down and connected me with my own feelings and emotions so much more. And it's real quick. And my husband has a hard time doing that. He's like, it's weird. I don't like
So I talked about this before, but I even elaborate more in the next book. I'm so excited about this thing, but I'm sorry I keep talking about it. But like, it's about for me, finding a calm mind was uncomfortable, but by finding and navigating that uncomfortable, I found comfort. But yeah, you mentioned that Insight Timer, I've been around enough men to know that meditation looks hippy dippy. You just got to find your form. It could be 5 minutes. I've been with some very tough men in the room. It took a while to calm their minds. Some people have dealt with some similar trauma. I meet with a group of men like that regularly. And these men, we all have adapted our own versions of calm meditation. Some of my best is when I walk in the woods and just sit on a log. And I do a cold plunge every morning. I have found that I can get into deep meditation through some discomfort, a cold plunge, the acupuncture mat I mentioned earlier. And these have helped me to find some stimulation, some stress, essentially a controlled stressor, to be able to just focus on everything up in that brain head of mine. Man, I would include, I've got Insight Timer. There's plenty of other apps out there.
There's so many. Yeah.
If you need to do it in a group, but just make sure you calm your mind. If there's for some people that have been through issues, I know being alone with your eyes closed can be very uncomfortable and very scary. So get with somebody you trust, close and lock the door, and get in a safe space if that's what you need to do. There are ways around it. I'll tell you when you really find it. And something I found, and this is different for everybody, I found less is more eventually. So you might need to start with more time, and that's going to be the hardest thing. Yeah. But then eventually you're fine with just a 5 minute here. And that's what I do. I do like 5 minutes in the morning, maybe like depending on the day, like 5 to 15 minutes in the midday. And then I do something before I go to bed. I'm also a person of faith. So I'll briefly talk about that. For me, I found just like prayer meditation to really comfort the soul, because I say something regularly, let go or let God. And there's comfort for me in that, because it's like, I can take care of this, but I'm going to let him take care of all the rest. So,
and I hear that.
Oh man, this has been a real treat, real pleasure, man. We covered so much in about an hour, and you know, for those that found value in this, I know you did. And if you know anybody is hurting, I believe, I'm not asking you to like, share, comment so I can get more views. I don't even care about that. I care about people being helped. Like, I don't, this one is specifically for everyone, but if you're in military, if you're a minority, especially what she talked about earlier, this is going to give you some value. Listen to it. And if you push back, listen to it, then I challenge you to listen to it again, especially the parts that you had to pause, rewind, or argue with in your mind, because I've done that on certain subjects. And I know some people listening will do that too. Was there anything else before we bop off here real quick? Nilaja?
No, follow me on all socials.
Yes,
Nilaja Montgomery. Hopefully you'll put them down there.
We will. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you again. This was a real treat, real pleasure. And thank you for listening to another episode of Strive 365. Take care.